a raise in this country, it's middle-class Americans who are working overtime and not getting paid for it. So, hopefully this is the kind of thing that Democrats and Republicans would actually be able to work together to implement. I haven't heard what the president-elect has had to say about this, but the possibility is there may be 87,000 middle-class workers in Indiana who may be interested in what he has to say about this, and another 134,000 workers in Ohio who are affected by this rule who may be interested in what he has to say about it as well.
And what does the administration think of the details that we know so far, that it was millions of dollars in tax incentives to stay, and then I guess there are other pieces that we don't know of it?
Yeah, listen, I think at this point I think ultimately we'd have to rely on the executives at Carrier to explain why they made the decision that they did. But again, if we're talking about 1,000 U.S. jobs that have been saved, we would welcome an announcement like that. But again, we need to see another 804 of them to equal.
But it's not that great. I mean, how would you kind of?
No, if you're one of those, if you're a worker or you live in one of the 1,000 families where that paycheck is being collected, then obviously that's welcome news. I'm not criticizing it at all. I think what I'm trying to highlight is, as you evaluate the strategy that's being put forward by the president-elect, I think it's worthy drawing a comparison to what was done in the last 8 years under President Obama. And if you'll indulge me, we talked a little bit about the Affordable Care Act earlier this week, sort of some metrics that you could use to judge the wisdom and approach that's put forward by the incoming administration with regard to health care reform. We've put together some metrics that you could use to judge the performance of the incoming administration's economic policy. And many analysts who've looked at the data have concluded that some of the rhetoric from the president-elect was critical. Metrics. The first would be jobs. Under President Obama and under the strategy that we have implemented, our economy has seen the largest streak of total job growth in our nation's history. Over the last 80 months, we've created 15.5 million jobs, and the unemployment rate has been cut in half from its peak that was reached back in 2011. So on the jobs front, President Obama has set quite a high standard, and one that will be a high bar for the next administration to live up to. The second metric would be wages. So far in 2016, we've seen wages grow at an annual rate of 3.1%. That's good wage growth. Not off the charts, but it's good. And we'll see if that's a rate that the policies of the next administration can continue. The third metric is something that got a lot of attention during the campaign: inequality. And what we know about 2015 is our country made historic progress in reducing inequality under the leadership of President Obama. We saw the median household income rise at the were for middle-class and working families, and for low-income households, who in 2015 saw their income rise almost 8%, while those at the top saw their income rise less than 3%. So we see a growing economy. We see wages and income growing for everybody in the country, but growing faster for those. That is important progress in reducing inequality, and certainly will be a high standard for the incoming administration to meet. Just two more. The fourth one is actually something that should be familiar to the president-elect and many of the people that he has nominated to his economic team, and that's just the stock market. Since President Obama took office, let me be precise. Since the stock market reached its low in March of 2009, just 2 months after President Obama took office, the S&P 500 has more than tripled. That certainly means money in the pocket for for a lot of people who invested in the market, and certainly a lot of money in the retirement accounts of a lot of middle-class workers who've been saving for their retirement and investing in the stock market. We'll see how the incoming administration performs based on market reactions to some of the policies they put forward. The last thing I would note is poverty. And in 2015, the number of people in poverty fell by 3.5 million. That is the fastest rate, or fastest decline. It's the fastest rate of decline since the 1960s. And that is a metric that the President is quite proud of. I haven't heard the incoming administration identify this as a priority, but President Obama certainly believes that fighting poverty and reducing poverty is a priority. And on his watch, last year, the poverty rate fell faster than it has in 50 years. So this is an economic track record that President Obama is proud of. I think it is a clear illustration of the smart strategy that we have implemented. The President-elect is preparing to take office, vowing to overhaul that strategy. We'll see if the reforms that he's promising work as well as what the Obama administration has been able to achieve. And again, data, but at some point in the future,
well, you could say something about the dollar as well, maybe about the strength of the dollar.
I'll let the incoming Treasury Secretary comment on that. But what I will, at some point, there will be some senior economic official for the Trump administration standing up here talking to all of you about the success of their economic strategy, and hopefully you'll draw upon some of the notes from this conversation and ask them about it.
Okay, and just one more thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Now, I should apologize for the long answer, but I appreciate it. I will.
15 more questions. Okay, so Pakistan read out this phone call with Donald Trump, and they included direct quotes saying, in part, "You have a very good reputation. You're a terrific guy. You're doing amazing work, which is visible in every way. I'm looking forward to seeing you soon." So does this, well, given the meetings that we've seen and the ways that they were conducted, as well as the phone calls and the contacts that have been made with foreign leaders, do you think that this signals a different kind of engagement around the world? And does the administration have concerns so far?
Well, listen, I mean, what you have read from is a readout that was put out by the Pakistani government reflecting a conversation and reflecting the words chosen by the president-elect. So I just don't have a lot of insight into either of those things. What I can say is that President Obama benefited from the professionalism and expertise of career diplomats at the State Department who were able to offer him good advice about engaging with world leaders.
To Mexico and think that they can extract economic incentives?
Well, listen, I think it's hard to tell at this point exactly what was driving Carrier's decision. I've seen a lot of speculation. Some people have speculated that it was the promise of improved is probably not the right word, the promise of federal taxation policies that would benefit Carrier. I know there's been some speculation that Carrier was threatened based on the defense contracting business they have with the U.S. government. There's also been some reporting to indicate that Carrier's decision was actually driven not by any federal level decisions, but by decisions that were made at the state level, potentially by the lame duck governor of Indiana, who also happens to be the vice president-elect of the United States. So there's a lot to unpack here. Ultimately, I think the executives at Carrier, if they choose to do so, will have to explain the decision that they made. I think the point that you are raising, though, Juliana, I think is a legitimate one, which is what is the most effective strategy for ensuring that the United States continues to be viewed by countries and companies around the world as an attractive destination for investment. And we have seen foreign direct investment in the United States increase under President Obama. It's because a lot of companies and countries recognize all of the advantages that are present or that exist in the United States, from our workforce, from our infrastructure, to our education system, to an environment that makes innovation possible. All of that has been part of our strategy. And the strategy under the Obama administration, as I just laid out, I think has served the American people, American workers, and the broader U.S. economy quite well. We'll have an opportunity to measure whether or not the results stack up for the kinds of reforms that President Trump is promising.
Are there concerns, though, that they've set up a moral hazard?
Well, listen, the strategy that the incoming administration is promising to use is very different than the strategy that we have pursued. And I think there's ample evidence to indicate that the strategy pursued by the Obama administration is one that yielded great economic benefits for the country. But President Trump won an election vowing to do it differently. And we'll have an opportunity to evaluate his approach based on the facts. And they've got a lot to measure up to, and it looks like we'll have an opportunity to do that. Okay. Hans.
You'll still be in the private sector. To go back to the wage growth issue, do you expect, based on what we're learning about the new Treasury Secretary, potential new Treasury Secretary, do you expect to pay, or wealthy Americans will pay a higher or less overall tax burden?
Well, even some of the rhetoric that we're hearing from the incoming administration is difficult to discern. During the campaign, I know that the president-elect vowed to raise taxes on people like him, and just yesterday, his incoming, the individual that he intends to nominate to be Secretary of the Treasury, indicated that that there would actually be no change in the net tax that's paid by higher-income Americans. So, look, I think the fact is they're still formulating exactly what their policy is going to be, and when it comes to tax reform, we know that ends up being complicated business because it has to move through the United States Congress, too. Again, one of the things that I did not include on here was tax policy, but you could certainly include in here the wisdom of the approach that President Obama has pursued in terms of locking in, making permanent tax cuts for middle-class families while asking those at the top to pay a little bit more. And that's had a positive impact on our economy, a positive impact on job growth, a positive impact on broader economic growth, a positive impact on reducing the deficit, and had the benefit of making our country just a little bit more fair. So the kind of approach that President Obama has pursued, I think, has been a good one, and the facts bear that out. But it sounds like we'll have an opportunity for another president to come in and suggest a different approach. But we'll have a chance to see how it stacks up with the approach put forward by the Obama administration. So, thanks. Kevin.
Thanks, Josh. Can you have someone, Jason or one of your staff, send out those notes you just sort of rattle off, those economic notes?
Yes, I can.
On the carrier thing, I know you probably were just making the point that you all had a great deal of success in your approach economically, but I think some people wondered if you were kind of taking a shot when you said, well, he's going to have to do it 800 more times to sort of get to where we are. Given the sensitivity of the people on the ground who are very worried, very concerned about losing their jobs, did you want to walk that back a little bit?
No, because again, I certainly am not doing anything other than welcoming the announcement from Carrier that stands to benefit potentially 1,000 workers. Economic strategy that we have put forward is one that saved actually more than 1 million jobs in the manufacturing sector and created another 805,000 jobs in the manufacturing sector. So again, I think if anything, I'm suggesting that the success of the incoming administration in protecting those manufacturing jobs is something that they're going to have to aggressively ramp up if they want to meet the standard set by the Obama administration. Just a little rough math would indicate that if President Trump is fortunate enough to serve 2 terms in office for 8 years, he's probably going to have to average about 2 of these announcements a week, every week of his 8-year presidency, in order to meet the same standard. So, bar's high, but he'll have an opportunity to try it his way, and we'll see if it works.
I want to ask you about the Rolling Stone interview, and I don't want to make more of this perhaps than some people might.
Okay.
The president was talking about the untenable nature of this sort of patchwork of having marijuana laws. In Colorado and Washington, and there's a new one in California and Massachusetts, and then other states have medical marijuana provisions. he's not suggesting, or I'm going to ask you, is he suggesting that there needs to be a federal standard when it comes to the management of marijuana law?
Yeah. I think what the president is suggesting is that it's increasingly difficult for federal law enforcement officials to be enforcing the law differently in a variety of states.